How's it going? And welcome to episode 171 of On the Wire, proud member of the Pitcher List Podcast Network. Follow the pod on the Twitter at On the Wire Pod. I am Adam Howe. You can follow me at 8th grade. That's all spelled out. Kevin Hastings can be followed at Hastings Kevin, but Kevin is off this week from the show, spending the holiday weekend in the way that we all wish we could be, repiping his house. So, Kevin, we are all very jealous of your 4th of July activities. God bless. Hopefully you get that done in quick order and you're back with us next week. But luckily for me, a very special guest, no stranger to the show, Mr. Lucas Berry, joining me. And you know Lucas from his work over at FTN Fantasy. And of course, as the 2023 overall champion of the NFBC Online Auction Championship. If you're not already following Lucas, fix that right now and check him out on the Twitter at LucasBierry33. That's LucasBierry 33 right now. Lucas, thanks for filling in my Kevin size shoes that I have open this weekend. How you doing, man? How's it been? How's the season going?
I'm doing all right, man. I appreciate you having me on, and season's going pretty good. It's going fast, but at the same time,
Yes.
just like looking through the box scores yesterday and seeing Kenta Maeda kind of getting blown up. I had him on a few teams for the first few weeks, and thinking of whenever I had to sweat that out, it feels like that was a long time ago. So while it goes fast, if you think about certain things, you're like, actually, that was a while ago. So it kind of goes fast, but you also get your money's worth in a full season roto.
Yeah, and of course, as we mentioned last week, we have already passed the halfway mark. Every team is now past the 81 game marker. Obviously, most people kind of see the All-Star break, which is fast approaching next weekend or next week, as the halfway point. Obviously, we know mathematically not true. So it's nice to get a little bit of a break, kind of catch your breath, see where we're at. But it doesn't mean that Faab is any less important going into week 15. Yeah, the 15th Faab run of the season. Lots still going on. Of course, the big thing that'll come up after the All-Star break, of course, is the trade deadline. So a lot of teams, a lot of players to be keeping an eye on, especially in your only leagues and those who might still have a hammer left and want to be spending some money in that direction. So a lot to pay attention to. And luckily, we have plenty of news to go over. Some big, some small, just some kind of keep in your back pocket. Maybe not actionable this weekend, but something to keep an eye out for. So, Lucas, let's if you're good, we'll get right into it. The news that we ended last episode with, that now we've had some time to really mull over, of course, was the MLB debut of James Wood, making his debut for the Washington Nationals. Curious just your take on Wood and if what you saw this past week was everything you expected and more. And what are you expecting to see as far as bids go for those of us who still have some money? And is it going to be worth it for the second half of the season?
Yeah, so debut wise, he went up against multiple left-handed pitchers, and being a left-handed hitter himself, that wasn't ideal, but it was good to see the team fully trust him from the outset and just put him out there into the fire. He hasn't hit a home run yet, but he has a stolen base. Plate discipline wise, he's held up pretty well. I mean, the AAA minor league statistics are off the charts, and I'm curious your take on this, Adam. With a lot of teams having a lot more money at this point this year than they did last year, I could certainly see at least one team in every league that thinks, "Hey, I can't mess this up." I've got $700-800 left if you really saved up, and I could see some ginormous bids on him since he's an uber prospect and looks to have everyday run rest of the season with 10 home run, 10 steal upside in a half year.
I can imagine there's going to be somebody in every league that spends 50% of their Fab on James Wood at this point in the season. Because if you know what, if you've been saving your money for whatever reason, you're running out of time to make
Yes.
that splash, to make a difference. And we talk about this all the time. Like, how do you budget your Fab? How are you spending your money throughout the course of the year? Kevin will always say, I want to spend, $20-30 every week, and then maybe save up that $200 or $300 bid or for that one time. And that I might be overestimating Kevin's words there, but the logic is still sound. If if you're not going to spend that kind of money at the halfway point, like that, every dollar becomes less valuable throughout the
Yeah.
rest of the season, because the impact a player can make is every week goes away. Like all of a sudden you got a week gone here or there. So that's why we see a lot of arguments about spending a lot of money early, because the players that you're bringing onto your teams can make more of a difference, assuming that they're going to stay on your teams all season long. It's like drafting them. That doesn't always work out. But at this point, the call ups and the trades and the difference makers, the difference that they can make are going to go downhill, as time goes by.
Yeah, completely agree with all that. And on top of that, you've got a team in 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th place. You're desperate at this point.
Yeah.
Offensively, it's been a pitching environment this year, and I've been satisfied with what we've seen. I've been excited. He has yet to hit the big home run, but honestly, just watching his at bats, it's been pretty much must watch for me to tune into him when I can.
Yeah. I would expect there to be some big bids for him this week, regardless of what we've seen this week, for all the reasons we just talked about, and the fact that I don't see him being sent back down. He's not the type of player that in a name and with pedigree, all those, keywords that you want to throw out there, that the Nationals have already ruined their chance of getting a Rookie of the Year bid out of him by calling him up at this point. He's already passed the Super 2, the expected Super 2 date. And so, like, there's no more manipulation to make unless he completely flounders in the first, 139 at bats. And then they send him down just for whatever reason. That would be crazy, even at this point. So I would expect this to be one of those call-ups, not like a pitcher call-up like David Festa, who's already been sent back down, or guys that can be manipulated a little bit easier. I don't foresee. I think he's playing the next 80 or so games for the Nationals the rest of the way. The to make room, and this is another reason I feel like he's not going anywhere. They didn't just option somebody to make room for him. They didn't kind of manipulate that. They outright sent Eddie Rosario completely packing. Unconditional release of Eddie Rosario from the Nationals. And my question originally to you was, where does he need to land to have any kind of fantasy appeal moving forward? We already know where he landed. He signed a minor league contract with the Atlanta Braves, as Atlanta has been doing ever since Ronald Acuna has gone down. They have just been, signing up the likes of, Laureano and others to minor league deals to kind of fill the backfill. Do you see Rosario getting into a position to actually become relevant again with the Atlanta organization?
Yeah, I think week to week relevance is the way I would look at him. He could be a guy where you stream in, see how his matchups are, but at the same time, if he faces multiple left-handed pitchers, I'm sure he'll be platooned. So he'll have moments. He might even have a week or two in an online championship 12-team league where you get somewhat excited for him if he has 7 righties, but kind of a streamer at this point.
Yeah, if that, and wait until he actually upgrades from that minor league contract and gets
Yes.
into the lineup, of course. Well, same kind of question revolves around another release. This time, the Miami Marlins DFAing Tim Anderson, as he not the same TA that we are used to from his days in Chicago. I mean, he has not been picked up or traded that I've seen anywhere. But is there a situation where he could find himself being traded, as the waivers continue to go, or get picked up into a situation where he can actually get some kind of playing time and actually be relevant again?
Man, that's a tough one. That's tougher than Rosario. Since we've seen him lose a starting status, go to a bench role, go to the minor leagues, come back and kind of somewhat resuscitate himself. Tim Anderson has maybe some personality clashes throughout some of the locker rooms that he's in. Um, Again, that's speculation, so who knows? But I don't know. Teams aren't willing to take a risk on certain guys personality wise. You saw that from Yasiel Puig and with Trevor Bauer as well. But I don't know. I think someone maybe will give him a minor league deal, but I don't know if that's a guarantee.
Yeah, just obviously at one point, this is a guy who is the face of or at least presented himself as like the face of baseball. Very big
Yes.
personality, big numbers on. You wanted him on your fantasy teams as well as on your major league teams, and obviously that it seemed like it just took a nosedive pretty quickly on both fronts. And I think it's going to take the very, very special situation to take notice once again. I thought Miami was that special situation, to be honest. I mean, we joked about it in the preseason that all Miami needed was to sign another second baseman. And Tim Anderson, as a shortstop, made an announcement at the beginning of the offseason that he was willing to play second base. And I'm like, oh, this is a match made in heaven. So obviously that did not come to fruition, at least not long term. So we'll see where he goes, or if he has that same kind of mentality as he sees what his options are moving forward. We had we'll give a couple of major league debuts in addition to James Wood. Some on the smaller names as we get through these two. One, a pitcher in Detroit, Kiter Montero, added to the roster after Casey Mize hit the IL. Do you see anything out of Montero that has piqued your interest? He's still a debut. He's still a pitcher. Pitching, especially in your deeper leagues, a little bit more difficult to come by. Is this something worth streaming, especially with good matchups? Or, do you have any kind of take on Montero moving forward?
I love looking for potentially hidden treasure in different places, but not thrilled here. 35 plus future value prospect. He had a 1.70 whip. That's 1.70 whip. Just didn't get much swing and miss in the minor leagues, and I'm going to avoid him at this point.
Yeah, it's probably fair. The only reason he was called out, as I mentioned, Casey Mize hits the IL, and we see this all the time. We see these IL stints, and we'll get to another one in a little bit. Right before, as we go up into the All-Star break, if nothing else, just to give these players a little bit of an extra break, a little bit of an extra breather. Sometimes they're, actual injuries. Sometimes maybe they're not. And I'm not sure Montero would have made that jump if that opportunity wasn't there. So I don't expect to see him a whole lot, at least in a starting role for the remainder of the year. So yeah, Montero, I'm in the same boat. Montero won't be somebody that I'm spending a ton of capital on heading into this Faab period. The other debut that I may be looking at, though, happened in Minnesota, and I talked about David Festa earlier getting sent back down, but this time this is on the offensive side. Brooks Lee joins the Minnesota Twins as a replacement for Royce Lewis, who, shocker, hit the IL once again. And I say that as somebody who has plenty of exposure to Royce Lewis this season. He has an abductor strain, and so we will see him out for at least through the All-Star break. But Brooks Lee is the focus topic here, Lucas. Do we see anything of interest as far as playing time, as far as opportunity that the Twins are going to give him moving forward, coming back from his own injury plagued season himself?
Yeah, quite an interesting prospect. He's not necessarily even one of those top 30. He's a borderline top 50 guy, but with proximity that can work as far as fantasy viability. I like the contact rates and the hit tool and solid plate discipline, but power is a concern for me with Brooks Lee, and he's not a burner, so he needs to hit for at least a 20 home run pace, I would think, for him to be a nice asset. But playing time wise, I mean, Minnesota shifts guys around a lot, but I think if he takes off running with the job, they might be able to try to pencil him in. Again, we'll see when Lewis comes back, but Minnesota's depth chart is kind of a big moving jigsaw puzzle.
I mean, we joked about it a lot last year. I mean, if you're worried about playing time in Minnesota, just wait a day or two. Somebody else gets injured, especially in the lineup,
Yeah.
and somebody else gets more opportunity. That hasn't really been much different this year, to be honest. They've been dealing with a whole plethora of injuries throughout the 2024 season. And as you mentioned, we'll see what happens when Lewis comes back. But Lewis is not coming back tomorrow.
Nope.
As Rocco Baldelli already said, he'll be out at least through the All-Star break. I mean, that's not saying much because that would be the minimum stint on the IL, as he was placed in the IL earlier this week. But that's to say that, Royce, they're going to want to be careful with him and again, to make sure that he's coming back properly. Brooks, for whatever it's worth, started all 3 games that he's been in the bottom third of the order, batting 8th, though he's had multi-hit games in 2 out of those 3 games and has had recorded an RBI in all 3 of them. Not that that's saying a whole bunch. 3 games, not a whole lot to look at. But if he does get the consistent playing time, I am interested, especially if he can continue to run the major league debut adrenaline and put that to good use at the plate. Another injury to, I guess, update everybody on is ultimately the entire Toronto bullpen situation. And that revolves around Jordan Romano, who's already been out, but he had arthroscopic surgery on his right elbow. And it is to be determined if he'll return this season at this point. Obviously, Chad Green has been filling in as the, I guess, closer. Not that Toronto has been giving any opportunities to close out games. He only has the 1 save since being put in the quote role. But Yimi Garcia, who supposedly had the role before Green, has been on the IL. He threw a side session on Wednesday and should be heading on a rehab stint this weekend. If all goes well, assuming there's no setbacks there, he could rejoin Toronto's bullpen next week before the All-Star break. What are you doing with Chad Green? Is it worth, when Yimi comes back, is it worth holding on to Chad Green to see if they just let him roll with it or if they give any opportunities? And if they're splitting, 1 save every 3 weeks, is this a situation that's worth, holding on to?
Yeah, that's fair. Their team quality's been a little bit low. The Jordan Romano thing has been sad for anyone that's drafted him. Came into the year injured in spring training and had a huge discount on him in the draft. And the people that took him looked kind of smart for a little while. And then unfortunately, his elbow flared up, which it's done before in previous seasons. So I don't think we'll be able to see Jordan Romano again the rest of the year. I know they said in 6 weeks he'll be shut down for at least 6 weeks, but I think he'll probably miss the rest of the year. And then with Chad Green and Jimmy Garcia, I think both of those guys are trade candidates. I think Green for the next week or 2 could see some occasional, as you put it, saves. And I think Jimmy could be traded into a setup role elsewhere, but maybe he retakes the role when he gets healthy. I like his stuff a little bit more than Green's, but it's a messy situation.
Yeah, I mean, Green's been lights out. I mean, he's been very
Yeah.
good. It's just a matter of if both of these guys are traded, which I would not, to your point, not be expecting otherwise, in the next couple weeks. I don't know that either one of them finds themselves into a closer situation
Yeah.
with their new teams. So we'll kind of keep an eye on that. It's just been really frustrating as somebody who picked up Chad Green kind of quickly and have not been able to actually get anything out of that return.
Yeah.
Staying in Toronto, Isaiah Kiner Falefa hit the IL with a left knee sprain. Does anybody in particular get his playing time, or is it just kind of split up between? They've obviously had their situations kind of grayed out with Orelvis Martinez, thinking he would obviously go into that role. He can't play for quite a while now, basically the rest of this season. As in Barger has been up, but has been playing very sporadically. And they have a couple other guys in here. But do you see anybody since Falefa has gone down kind of take the reins of his playing time, or is it just kind of sprinkling around the extra playing time in Toronto?
Yeah, I think sprinkling around is fair. I mean, you're seeing a little bit more consistent playing time for Davis Schneider, and that's good to see. But it seems like he's either one of the best hitters in the American League or he's sitting on the bench. There's no in between for him, um,
Right.
outside of striking out like crazy. But he's an interesting player, but I just don't know what to think. And then Ernie Clement, he's been playing a bit more, about 7 starts straight, but he's not really a 15-team guy, more of an AL only. So nothing too exciting with IKF hitting the shelf.
Yeah, I mean, IKF was playing every single day,
Oh,
so you
absolutely.
kind of hoping somebody. I mean, for those whole, I guess I'll ask you, like, in those deeper leagues where you're actually playing Falafel, like, are you holding on to him through this injury? Are you hoping he comes back and regains that same kind of playing time? Or are we at a point in the season where obviously any kind of little injury is not something that you're concerned or worried about?
Um, yeah, I do have one share of him, and my initial instinct was to cut him just to get more flexibility since, everyone has multiple injuries at this point. Um, but if they say it would be a minimum IL stint, I might think about it. But my initial thought was to cut him just because he is a fungible player.
Yeah, and the fact that he was being moved to the top of the order over the week prior to him moving into onto the IL, at least shows what Toronto wants to do with him when healthy. So could still be a valuable piece if you can give him that extra rest through the All Star break as well. All right, we got a couple. We got a big trade to talk about. Big trade, the only trade before the trade deadline, and a couple other options and injuries, and we'll get to those right after this quick break. All right, so that huge blockbuster trade, and I love this. I want to give credit to the tweet, but I don't have it in front of me. But the best one, it was a trade from Tampa Bay, where they traded away a pitcher and they got a minor league player in return. And the tweet, paraphrasing, of course, is I love this trade for Tampa. Who they give up and who they get. It didn't matter because it's like every trade that Tampa makes that involves sending a pitcher out. You have to start wondering what the other team doesn't know about that situation. So we have Aaron Savali being traded to the Milwaukee Brewers, which ushered in the return of Shane Baz returning to the Tampa Bay rotation. First, let's start with Savali in Milwaukee. He moves right into the rotation, obviously, without any kind of warning or prep or whatever. I'm assuming that he stays there, in your opinion. And if so, I mean, this is a winning ball club, at least currently, as it's currently constructed. Does this add any added value to Savali, where you're going to be putting him in your lineups more often based on NL Central, based on the winning ball club, all those other extra factors?
Yeah, like you said, a lot easier matchups for Savale. Anytime Baltimore was on the schedule, you should have been sitting him,
Hmm.
just because they're on that no-fly list, unless you're an SP1 or maybe SP2. Um, so the ability to pitch against teams like the Pirates, the Reds are not a loaded lineup when they're not at Great American. A little bit easier side of the story there. And I just like the defense a bit more for Milwaukee. They have a tremendous outfield defense, so I think that'll convert a few more outs for Savale. Um, and I just don't think he could get any worse for Savale. Career-wise, he's been a 120 whip. That's very usable for 15-team leagues. Um, Strikeout rate went up a lot in Tampa, and just the fact that these very smart clubs like Cleveland, Tampa, and Milwaukee are acquiring him makes me think that, yeah, he's probably not going to achieve front end upside status, but front end of the rotation status. But I think he'll be a usable pitcher in all formats.
Yeah, you talk about that schedule for Milwaukee. They play a bunch of teams in their division as they come back from the break. Of course, next week Pittsburgh and Washington. Nothing to sneeze at per se. I'm not using that phrase correctly, but that's okay. They face off. They only face off against the Cubs as they come back, and they're out of their division. And we talked about this last couple of years. Obviously, the weighted part of the weighted schedule is not weighted as heavily as it once was, but you still are playing your division opponents more often than everybody else. But as we come out of the break, they're still Milwaukee's still set to face off against the Cubs, Miami. Yeah, they got a series against Atlanta in there as well. But then they go right to Washington. They face Atlanta again, Cincinnati, the Dodgers, Cleveland, so St. Louis. So it's a mixed bag, but it does seem on the lighter side overall. And Savali's not going to hit every single one of those scary series. But he's going to get one or two, and doesn't necessarily mean he has to be in your lineup for those matchups. But I like I like the point that you pointed out is like all these teams that we have associated with having smart eyes on pitchers specifically are interested in Savales regardless of what his overall production has been. They see something else that maybe they can unlock or they can help out with. And you have to assume he's taking all of that. He's working as a sponge as well. It's not as though whatever he learned in Tampa or Cleveland stays in Cleveland or stays in Tampa as he moves to this next team. So hopefully he can better himself in that realm by taking on whatever Milwaukee's going to add to him for the second half of the season as well.
I completely agree. I completely agree with you there. But whatever Tyler Anderson learned with the Dodgers, that did not translate. I'll say that much.
He didn't even have to train. He didn't have to travel that far either.
No, he didn't.
All right. Well, I mentioned Cleveland, so I will do a really bad segue and say, all right, let's move over to Cleveland here as they optioned Tristan McKenzie. I think a lot of us were just worried he wasn't going to make through the season due to injury concerns, but now he's being optioned outright back to AAA to make room for the return of Gavin Williams. Is there any reason to be stashing McKenzie at this point in the season? He's still 40% rostered in main events. Are you expecting to see him on a majority of drop list this weekend for Faab?
Yeah, I think so. As far as being a drop everywhere, just no control at this point. 41% ball rate, 14.4% walk rate. Velocities dipped off, injury concerns galore. I had him in an OC this year, and I dropped him after about the second or third week. And I was kind of excited slightly, but it was like you just have to just face the reality that at this point, this guy is not his normal self, because when he's normally right, it looks nothing like this. And I hope that he can get healthy and get right.
Yeah, I mean, we see this all the time. You never know for sure that if a guy's actually hiding an injury or kind of playing through an injury without actually hearing it from their mouths or from their team doctors or the managers, what have you, until the offseason. And then on the offseason, all of a sudden it all comes out. Like, yeah, I've been battling blisters or I've been battling leg pain or whatever. Like it might be the most innocuous thing that you can't tell, but you can tell based on the production that we've been seeing. Obviously Max Muncy comes to mind as the biggest culprit of it, at least last year. But on a pitcher side, I think it's a lot more noticeable as far as like, because you could see it all in one start, never mind over the course of multiple starts. Where the hitter, it's a little bit more, you need a bigger sample size to be like, all right, something's happening here. And so McKenzie's obviously needs to go make himself right in AAA. I might say that if he does get the call back up this season, I might have a little bit more faith that they're not going to call him up unless they feel he's ready to go, both health wise and production wise. So I might have a little bit more faith in that, but yeah, I'm not holding on to him past this weekend. San Francisco is expecting to get Kyle Harrison back into their rotation. He's still available in a few of those OCs, 17% unrostered in those 12 teamers. But less so like you're all right. If he's available, great. Go ahead, check your line, check to see if he's available. Pick him back up in advance. But I think, are you looking at the impact he might have in the San Francisco rotation, or is this 1 week? It's a difficult week to like make these kind of measurements because it's a week that leads into the All-Star break, and then everything kind of gets reset as we head into after the break. But Harrison, obviously, if he's getting called back up before the break, he's healthy, he's good to go, he's not going anywhere, knock on wood. Do you have any kind of expectations to what to see out of the San Francisco rotation with him back in the mix?
Yeah, that'll be interesting. They have definitely had a patchwork quilt type of rotation at this point. And, you've got a couple of guys coming back, getting healthy. Keaton Wynn, he's on the mend. Blake Snell is working his way back, had a rehab start with AAA Sacramento. Robbie Ray at some point will be back. I'm sure with Ray, they'll probably try to take it more easier on him than the other guys since he hasn't debuted yet and he has limited bullets. But with Harrison, whenever he comes back, It's interesting with Harrison because I think he has a lot more room to grow, but I think even in this second year stage, I think he has strikeout upside to give you, with the benefit of hoping for more in the future once he gets a little bit better command. So I'm excited about Harrison, and if he's in an OC, I would love to grab him.
Yeah, as I mentioned, 17%. So check yours, Lucas, to make sure he's not
Oh, I will.
available in yours. But yeah, you bring up Robbie Ray. I mean, it's a good point. He finished up his third rehab stint, went 3 innings, let up 3 runs, in AAA, Sacramento, I believe. Yep, which is weird because I'm pretty sure that's the ballpark that the A's are going to be playing in next
Ooh.
year. So that was awkward. He's like, oh, it's not Giants Park anymore. But anyway, Ray very well could make his debut before the All-Star break. Like he could come back at the end of the week. There's movement in their rotation. I believe that Logan Webb will not start at the end of the week, which would if he did, it would hurt his chances of playing in the All-Star game, and things like that. So I wouldn't be surprised to see Ray come back at the end of the week. But to your point, it would be more of a bullpen game in that
Mhm.
situation than anything else. But it may be somebody worth, if you're interested in it, this would be the week to grab him, stash him, and then giving him a little bit of extra time to get it right. But if you pick him up this weekend and he doesn't start at all until after the All-Star break, you're just stashing a little bit longer than you probably want to. But we talk about Robbie Ray. The fact that I'm talking about Robbie Ray without Kevin, I feel is dirty. I feel like that I needed to have his opinion on that because we all know what Kevin's opinion on Robbie Ray is, and it's not usually positive.
Unfortunately, I showed him
Yeah,
one of my rosters that first pitch Arizona, and this is probably about 2 to 3 years ago, and he said Robbie Ray, and he was having a good time, so he might have been loosey goosey, and he goes, "I'd rather have Evan Phillips than him," and he hadn't
yep,
even
that
gotten a
sounds about
save to
right.
his name yet, and I'm like, Robbie Ray gets Tommy John within the first few weeks, and Evan Phillips is a closer on one of the best teams in the game. That's a great call by Kevin. I'm going to give him props
There we
again.
go. Sometimes it takes some time. Sometimes it happens right away. All right, the last piece of news I want to touch on before moving into the next section is Jared Jones of the Pirates. He's dealing with the lat strain, and since I made this outline, he has officially been moved to the IL, just in time. Again, just like Casey Mize, just enough time to make it through the All-Star break. Are you worried about this, or is this a situation where you think it's really creative innings management, which we see without knowing it for sure year in and year out, especially with young pitchers who, I mean, Jones has been pitching at the major league level since day one. He had a long spring as well. Is this innings management, or is this, an injury that you're actually concerned about?
I'm concerned a little bit. They've announced that it's a grade 2 lat strain, which obviously you'd rather see grade 1, but hey, at least it's not a grade 3. So
There you go.
hard hitting analysis there, but no, yeah, it's a slight concern, but I think that they'll go slow, they'll get him right. It's going to ding the pitching rotation depth of the Pirates, but it's also going to kind of naturally slow down his innings, which you kind of mentioned earlier. So that'll be a slight benefit. They'll be able to use him hopefully down the stretch if they're remotely in the wild card discussion, but it is what it is. Just shelf him for 3 to 4, 5 weeks, whatever it takes, and hopefully he's ready to rock and roll when he gets back.
Yeah, I mean, I don't necessarily foresee Pittsburgh kind of filling his rotation spot in this last week before the
Mm.
All-Star break either. If they feel in any kind of desperation doing a single bullpen game to kind of fill that spot, not out of the question. They do have a full week going into the break, so there is the possibility of somebody getting a spot start here or there. But I'm not worried about necessarily them filling in long term. So it's not somebody, it's not a situation I'd be targeting to kind of fill in my gaps moving forward. All right. Well, that's enough news as far as Fab is related. Of course, there's a whole bunch of other stuff happening throughout baseball. And to get all the news of everything that's happening, you should, of course, be listening to the First Pitch podcast with Casey Bubba and Jake Crumpler on the weekends. They break down all the news, highlights, and observations from every day's worth of games as well as looking ahead at each slate to keep you up to date with everything you need to know to win your fantasy leagues. And of course, with all things starting pitching, Nick Pollock has you covered with his Plus Pitch podcast daily every weekday. He highlights every starting pitching performance from the day prior and also looking ahead at the next set of streaming options for you there. In just a minute, I'm going to talk to Lucas a little bit about what he has going on over at FTN as he plans out your hitting matchups for the week. We'll get to that right after this. All right, you are still listening to On the Wire. Thank you so much for joining us. Whether you're watching us live on the tube of views or on the Twitter machine, thank you so much. Appreciate it. And of course, as you can probably tell, I am here, but Kevin Hastings is missing in action as he, does the hard work of repiping his house. I can't give him too much slack for it. I mean, the man lives in Hawaii. And so if you got to repipe your house, there are worse places that you have to do that in. And he knows it. So God bless you, Kevin. Keep it up. But Lucas, I really wanted to get your really quickly touch on this piece that you do over at FTN. You started doing this piece this year, if I'm not mistaken, correct? Where your weekly hitting planning. Talk to me a little bit about that, about the article itself, and then I guess I'm just curious to know. I want to let people know like what your process is for kind of like mapping that out for the week. We see so many streaming pitch. I just talked about, Nick Pollock does his daily one. So many pitching streamings and pitching matchups and stuff like that. There's not always as much attention given to the weekly or even daily matchups, unless you're playing DFS, of course, on the hitter side. Talk to me a little bit about why you chose to kind of focus your attention in that way, and then how that has helped you be more successful as well.
Oh, absolutely. Well, as far as why I decided to do it, there was a one of our league mates in Glarf, a Matty Wood sized hole that was left. He decided to just play fantasy full time and not write about it. So he had this article prior, and he did a really good job. I've actually read some of his old articles and tried to kind of live up to what he did. Really, my first step in the process is to look at promotions and demotions, and that's where I can write a little bit about the players. Usually, it's about 6 to 8 players that I write about there, and that's a lot of fun actually, to just slow down and just kind of think about where they're at, because it's either a good write up or it's okay, here's why it didn't work out, kind of thing. Um, then the next bulk of the writing really is on the injury side, where I'm looking at because you always have that guy that, he was removed on Sunday, and his first game's not until Tuesday, and it's like, okay, what are we doing here? And that's just a pain. So hopefully, this is able to centrally locate that info. If you're an FTN subscriber, you can pop in there and just see, okay, this guy, he had a concussion, and he's supposedly okay, but just kind of, it puts it all there for you. And also the other thing I've been trying to focus on is like rehab assignment updates. Xander Bogaerts, he's in a AAA rehab, and he came back much sooner than anyone expected. So that type of stuff's covered in there. And then as far as just the actual hitter rankings itself, I look at the schedule, and there's a section about schedules there as well. And if you're looking at a 5-game week compared to a 7-game week, that's a huge difference. I mean, that could take a solid contributing second baseman into a top 5 guy if he has the 7 games, and one of your studs only has 5. So it can make those matchups close, because over a full season, that's going to add up really quickly. So just kind of looking at the schedules, knowing what teams and handedness the players have, and just trying to kind of line up the ranks manually the best that I can. So yeah, I've went on a lot there, so I don't know if you had anything else to add, Adam.
No, I mean, I definitely do not take what you do lightly, because it's not something I've ever wanted to take on myself. So, I mean, does the process, I guess, so when I was writing more, which was a couple years ago when I was writing Batters Box art. They would, I would do it weekly, but it was an article that came out daily at Pitcher List, just highlighting, some of the best hitting performances without looking at the, the Bryce Harpers of the world and stuff like that. It was fun because it's like it really kept me connected with
Yes.
what was going on, and it helped me make decisions and moves in my own leagues, as opposed to simply relying on the works of others. Do you find yourself putting more energy into this article because it has helped you personally, and or just for the love of giving out that information? Obviously, like you said, you got to be an FTN subscriber, which if you're not and you're listening to this, I'm not sure what's going on here. But if you should change that at least for the checkout Lucas's article. But yeah, my question is like, do you find yourself taking over this article being helping you? I mean, you won an overall last year, so there's not really much way to go up. And yeah, I'm gonna scatter in some praise for you. Sorry, it's
Appreciate
gonna
that.
happen. But like, do you find yourself helping you with your own process by
Oh yeah.
being that much more in tune?
Yeah, it does. And you're absolutely right. When you're kind of, and I rank them the best I can, and I look at it, but I'm not spending hours on, should I put, Jake Fraley, over Sal Frelick. I'll just kind of do the best that I can. It's not like I'm the robot Phil DeSalt and can just do 50 algorithms in my mind. No, I'm just kidding. I
Wrong
love
with you,
Phil there,
Lucas.
but
What's wrong with you?
don't don't have that ability. But yeah, you certainly are like, okay, well, I've seen that Adolis Garcia has been cold lately, but hey, he's an outfield one whenever you have players like Tatis, Acuna, Mookie Betts hurt. So just that's been the biggest thing, Adam, is like outside of the top 10 shortstops, and you could throw Neto and Bichette, and that's kind of it. I mean, you see the depth of the positions where for a second half league it would be interesting, although you'll have to factor in when some of the guys will come back from injuries, but you can kind of see which positions are loaded, which ones are a little bit more shallow. And even after I publish it, I'll just kind of think, oh, wait a second. Did I have this guy high enough? Because I went after him everywhere in free agency last night, and I want to make sure I have Wilyer Abreu jacked up high. That was a realization I had a few months ago. But yeah, it's been a lot of fun, and it has helped my game personally.
Yeah, I find these things also just useful outside of like your NFBC weekly leagues. It's just looking at weekly matchups for your daily leagues, for even for your DFS, because you can kind of get a preview, a head start as to these matchups that are coming up, these situations that you could be leaning on early in the week, and then throughout the course of the week if you are playing in those situations as well. Well, that's great stuff. Again, check out Lucas's work over at FTN. You can follow him on the Twitter as well at LucasBerry33. There'll be a link, obviously, in the show notes as well of this episode. But more than likely, you've listened to this show before. You're probably already following Lucas at this point. You should be if you haven't already. We're going to get into some recommendations category by category for this 15th Faab run. We're going to do that right after this quick break. All right, we are back. You're still listening to On the Wire. Thank you so much for doing that. And we are going to get right into some players that have eyeballs on, Lucas. In each category, we still got half the season to go, or just under half the season to go. Still plenty of time to make adjustments. I guess I'm going to ask you this too before we get into specific players. Are you at what point in the season are you looking at your specific categories rather than your positional needs, or vice versa? Have you already made that flip? Do you do that from day one? Or like what's your overall mentality when it comes to like who you're chasing, what you're trying to fill? Is it more important to get the categories, or is it more important to make sure you have players in every position?
That's a tough one. Well, just to sidestep your question, both really. So again, I talked about how the shortstop is kind of a weak position. It's not a position teams platoon at. And there's some shortstops that are just not worthy of using in fantasy baseball, like Enrique Hernandez or Miguel Rojas or whoever they're putting at short in Los Angeles. So in the OC, I kind of went for J.P. Crawford. And probably about a month ago, Mason Wynn was cut in my league, so I went for him. So like in outfield is a tough position too for me in some leagues. Sometimes you have the ability to just kind of pick up a guy and throw him in there, but other other leagues, I noticed the market is different, where it just sucks up every pitcher that's worth anything, or they'll take any outfielder that's worth anything. Like different waiver wires play so differently. So based on the team need, I will look at position, but lately I've actually been trying to drill into categorical needs through standings, but position is certainly a big concern too.
Yeah, I mean, I just feel like we talk about this early in the season, and like at a certain point, at least in the halfway mark, you really got to start. If you haven't already, you make sure that you are chasing the gains that you can make early and often, because sooner or later it does become too late. I don't think we're at the too late mark yet, but let's
I hope
talk
not.
about yeah, fair. Let's talk about the specific categories and who you got your eye on, Lucas, that we can all check to see if they're available in our leagues, based on a variety of things. But we'll start with power, guys that can give you a home run boost, RBI, and why you have your eye on them. Give me a name to look at in my leagues.
Well, you've been a mystery man on our outline, so I don't know who exactly you're going to say, but I do feel we have to mention James Wood as a good target for this.
There you
We
go.
mentioned him at the previous point of the show, and I have another dude written down, but just the fact that he's just scorched the ball so well, reached the major leagues at 21. Usually, players of that demographic just have a much higher hit rate and have a longer career. 59.1% hard hit rate in AAA. I've never seen a number that high, especially for such a young prospect. Although I'm sure Vlad Jr. probably was that high. Granted, that was a while ago, but yeah, I think if you want some home runs and some steals, James Wood would be my number one target.
Nice. Yeah, I'll be honest with you, Lucas. I don't have anybody. I don't have like this has been a tough category
Yes,
to go after. And it's like every name I kind of look down. Obviously, you want to make sure you throw out names uh that are available,
available. Yes,
and that actually can be picked up. You're not going after, I mean, James Wood obviously is available everywhere, especially in your NFBC formats where he didn't make his debut until Monday,
Jeez.
or at the beginning of the week. So it's been rough. And like there are guys out there that I want to pick up, I want to like, but I'm just not seeing any kind of playing time shift in a variety of ways that is really bringing anybody to the forefront. You got another name on here though worth mentioning, and I'm not going to steal him from you, so I'm just going to let you take all the thunder here. In the power category, so talk to me about Rowdy Telez.
Yeah, Ready to Les. He's picked it up a lot lately. He's had a very disappointing past couple of years, but he seems to be the full-time guy against right-handed pitching in the Pirates system. It's a lineup that's okay. I mean, it's not great, but full-time at bats and a guy who could hit a 23 to 25 home run pace. I think he's a guy you can put him in against plenty of righties and use him for a few weeks, and unless he slips up, then you can move on. But yeah, I like him.
Yeah, I mean, just somebody who finds his way into stints where he's being more valuable than you thought he was going to be at any given
Yeah,
point. Um, we'll move into the speed category then. And somebody that I always have my eye on, and I don't know that this will be beyond this coming week. But Johan Rojas is back with the Philadelphia Phillies, and Kyle Schwarber may be back sooner, at the minimum stay. He may be back for the Phillies on Tuesday. But Bryce Harper probably is going to stick out the rest of the week on the IL, giving Rojas a little bit of extra breathing room as far as playing time goes. And he's been playing pretty much every day since getting the call back up, which coincides basically with Bryce Harper's IL stint, obviously also Schwarber's IL stint as well, because they went on the IL at the same time. So Rojas in Philadelphia is somebody I will always have interest in the speed category, especially stolen bases. And he is one of those few players who in Philadelphia who can actually add a positive glove to the outfield as well. And so it'll be somebody that I'm eyeing in those leagues where I need, especially stolen bases. He's still batting at the bottom of the order. It's not like he's batting leadoff or anything like that, but batting ninth is the second leadoff spot, right? That's as it's been said. So that'll be somebody who might, it's still opponent offense. It's even with those guys missing, he's still gonna have an opportunity to score some runs. And as Kevin and I always mentioned, this is a guy that even if he doesn't start a game, he still has the ability to come in as a pinch runner and get you a stolen base at any given point.
Yeah, I'm glad that you said that last part there because my guy, who we'll talk about in the steals department, like for example, he was sitting today, so I had a tough time playing him. And he has a lefty on the weekend, and he won't play against the lefty, but he could have 2 steals this weekend.
Yep.
So that's the hard part about steals and why I understand why teams get behind, because it's like we want to vacuum up the plate appearances, but sometimes these guys go Gerard Dyson and just get 30 plus steals somehow and play like 300 plate appearances the whole year.
Yeah, I mean, he's not available anywhere anymore. But David Hamilton in Boston is
Yeah.
doing the same
Oh, yeah.
exact thing. Like he was playing every day. He was even batting second most of the time, but then 3 days off in a row and still found a way to steal a bunch of bases for the most part. He didn't get into every game, but those are the types of players that you can still be. It's the only category. Like, yeah, you can get a pinch hit home run. Jesse Winker did that the other day. Facing a lefty to start the game, so he was on the bench, but he came in and had the only run of the game, and it was a home run. But it's so much more difficult to kind of predict than it is a speedster, where that's literally their job. That's their one job in life. It's like a kicker on a football team. You got one job, and that's what you're gonna do. So yeah. Well, tell me the other options that I might have out there in the speed department.
Yeah, big shift when you're looking at main event compared to online championship. But Pete Crow Armstrong of the Chicago Cubs, he's only available in 2% of mains, which I could see him draw a little bit of money in the main, and 38% own percentage in online championships. So he's just kind of one of those guys where if you're absolutely desperate for steals, I think he's a very solid little pickup. He's got 16 bags this year in only 53 games. He's not hitting the ball very well, though, but he's providing some of the best defense in the league in center field. So I think for now his job is safe. But yeah, it can be tricky to play these types, as we said. But if you got a 1 or 2 points and steals, and you have a great offense, otherwise, then this is the type of guy you might look at.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, this is the toughest part, is like finding the guys that are available not only in your 12s but your 15s.
Yeah.
And obviously, you're at a point in the season where you know it's either very obvious, a very obvious shift in either availability, or sorry, in opportunity, which we'll get into in a second, or a call up of some kind, or an injury or something else has to come about that gives somebody a little bit more of a bump in those deeper leagues. Everybody's kind of on top of that. Speaking of the opportunity, let's talk about some hitters that might have a good one ahead of them for this week and then maybe beyond into past the All-Star break. Looking at the schedule ahead to keep in mind for the week leading up to the break, we have a handful of teams that have 7 games, a full work week ahead of them, including Cleveland, Detroit, the Angels, Atlanta, the Mets, Washington, Cincinnati, Pittsburgh, Arizona, and Colorado. All have 7 games. Kansas City and San Diego do enjoy 2 off days before getting the 3 off days of the All-Star break. And nobody has any weird off days, so all these off days come on Monday or Thursday. Colorado is away all week. They are at Cincinnati for 4, so not that much of a difference as far as ballparks are concerned. But then they go to they end the week in New York against the Mets for 3. Cincinnati, as I mentioned, is home for 4 against Colorado. And they stay home for 3 against Miami to end the week. So very favorable hitting matchups there. With all of that in mind, I will stick around in Colorado. Again, difficult to get to the main event rostership here, but I will go more on the 12-teamer here, because it is somebody I picked up in my home league. As soon as it took a little while for me to realize he was back. Brendan Rodgers, obviously back from the IL, playing every day for the Colorado Rockies and doing a pretty good job of doing that and getting acclimated pretty quickly. As he's batting right in the middle of that lineup, playing a lot of the games in Colorado this week, or this as we're recording this, and then going to Cincinnati for 4 next week. Situation in the middle infield, as we talk about a lot, that is hard to fill up. Shortstop, as you mentioned, not something you platoon, but the middle infield in general, not a position that has been easy to kind of fill or stream throughout the season, especially in your leagues where, like the NFBC, where you need the 20 games to qualify at one of those positions. Only eligible at second base, so still only the position you're really going to be utilizing him in. But still producing at a high level in Colorado and for the foreseeable future. I would assume that he keeps oh geez, what's his name? The second baseman that just came up recently for Colorado, and I don't have.
Amador.
Yeah, thank you. I expect the fact that he made it back from the IL first keeps him down in the minors when he is healthy enough to return from his IL stint as well. But we'll kind of see how that situation rolls out as when the time comes. Anybody else a little bit more available that is seeing a little bit more playing time or has good matchups? This is literally your wheelhouse as far as like what you do with your weekly article now. So give me somebody good that I can add to my list.
Well, I just want to say this. We talked about streaming and playing with the matchups and all that. And the easiest low-hanging fruit is kind of what you nailed there with Rodgers. If you look at his home batting average, it's a 318. That works in a 6-team league. I mean, a 318 batting average to just fluff up your ratios. I know Kevin isn't the biggest fan of cores as far as, having to deal that homework wise and all that in a weekly league. In a semi-weekly league, I know Kevin's down to do that dance, but that's why even like Michael Toglia, he's not a huge prospect, or even a guy like Montero who got DFA'd. Like, these guys deserve some sort of focus just because of the park.
I wanted to bring Toglia up in the power department, but he's rostered everywhere. Everybody is
True.
like,
People woke up this week.
he would have been my go-to. But yeah, if Toglia whatever is available, obviously I'm going after him in that situation as well. Though he did get bumped down to I think 8th in the lineup today, which was not something I wanted to see since he had been batting like 4th or 5th pretty much every day. But that has a lot to do with like the 220 average that he kind of brings to the table as well. So yeah, I mean that you take the good with the bad when you absolutely have to.
Yes, absolutely. Now my guy here is Brett Wisely, middle infielder, second baseman on the Giants. He's not a prospect necessarily. He's more so kind of that org depth guy, but I like a little bit of what I've seen for a 15-team league, not necessarily 12-team yet. 10% barrel rate, striking out 22% of the time, which isn't too bad. His BABIP's through the roof, but it's helped him out to a good batting average. And he gets a good week next week. And then coming back from All-Star break, he gets a 3-game set in Coors Field. So I think he's a decent ad for a 15-teamer for middle infield help.
Yeah, good name to keep an eye on, especially with what he's got coming up moving forward. We've got some pitchers to throw out there as well. So let's get right into it. Usually take another break, but I feel like I've taken enough breaks now. So Lucas, let's get right into wins and strikeouts. I mentioned how streaming middle infield, or at least filling middle infield, has been difficult. Pitching is obviously no different, especially in your 15 teamers. Give me somebody. I love the name you have on here because I just streamed him this past week. And as much as I loved the 7 innings of no runs, I would have liked to have had more than one strikeout. But tell me why I should be keeping an eye back on Jose Quintana moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Quintana is a guy that, when I looked at him this this offseason. His velocity went down, which is a big concern for me. But lately, he's just been a lot better. The previous 3 starts before this week, he had 16 innings with 21 strikeouts, so that'll work. And then, matchups wise, it's a good set of matchups. He goes against Washington, and his left-handed arm will neutralize guys like Jesse Winker and CJ Abrams. And then he gets the road Rockies for a Sunday start. So he's available in 12% of main events. He's going to go for probably $30 plus, I think, in those leagues. And I think in an online championship, if you're looking for Ks, he'll probably get you 10 plus Ks next week with the 2 starts. And I like him there too.
So I'm not confident about this, but you can't not keep an eye on Joey Estes in your 12
Yeah.
teamers based on what we've been seeing. Should have a 2-step coming up this coming week. Am I crazy? I mean, I know obviously it's the A's.
Oof.
The win chance is not amazing.
The matchups. I like the
And
player, but the
in
matchups are a little
Fenway
slight concern.
at Philadelphia, like there's a reason already why he's only 5% rostered in OCs. And but like his recent success enough to be like, all right, this is a 2-step. I've gotta, I at least have to pay attention here, or are the matchups just enough to be like, no, thank you.
I lean towards probably no thanks. I like the player. I think he's intriguing. Kind of like we saw with JP Sears last year, where it was like, if you're not locked in, you probably don't care. But if you actually watch him and kind of see his starts and see his first half last year for Sears, you were like, okay, maybe there's something here. And I have that same feeling with Estes. He's intriguing, but the matchups are too tough unless my ratios I'm already punted him, which hopefully I haven't. But hey, some teams might have.
Sure. I should probably mention the fact that earlier, but I'll say it now. It's a mental note. Make sure you know that the Cubs and the Cardinals do play a doubleheader on Saturday, the 13th. So that could play a role in, especially when you're looking at hitters to kind of stream in that situation, get as many at bats as possible. And there will be more opportunities for players that fit into our next category, where we're talking about our ratio situations. ERA and WHIP, they are still categories that we have to pay attention to down the line. And I always say I'm looking for the players that did not pitch on Saturday and or Sunday, specifically Sundays, at least in the reliever options that you might have out there. And then giving you the most opportunity to get as many innings out of them in the rate and hurting and hopefully helping your ratios as much as possible heading into the break. And so with that doubleheader between the Cubs and Cardinals, there's just one extra game. They both have the Cubs have a seven games because of that. Cardinals, same thing with the Cubs off on Monday, Cardinals off on Thursday. So they have extra game in that weekend stint, especially on the hitter side when you can make those hitter moves. But give me somebody to add to my list. Kevin and I always joke every week. It's just a long list of players that you always have on your watch list based on their usage, based on what they've been doing, and basing on how their teams are continuing to use them. I see the name that you're going to throw out here, and I'm very surprised as to his roster sit percentage. Just seemed
Yeah,
like a
same.
name that we heard a lot about in the preseason, even in the early weeks of the season. Did yeah, talk to me. Tell me why I should be considering bringing up his roster percentage.
Yeah, I agree. I thought he would have a higher roster percentage. And I'm glad that you said you look at if the middle reliever pitched on Sunday and Saturday. I was going to mention that if you didn't, so I'm glad that you touched on that because I hear some people like the Colin McHugh, stream him in game that you and Kevin made famous on this show years ago. And other people are like, I've talked to people and like, I don't know how to stream relievers. Well, it's really not that hard. Look at the season long stats. Hopefully they've been hot of late. And if they weren't used on a Saturday or a Sunday, there's a reasonable chance they'll get 3 appearances and at worst probably 2 if they didn't go over the weekend. So Matt Strom is kind of my guy. He's in a loaded Phillies bullpen. He's actually only rostered in 7% of main events and 3% of OCs. And Um, I think his usage has maybe made people upset because like he was used on July 3rd and he wasn't used tonight. And then previously he was used on June 29th, June 27th, and June 26th. And then his previous two usages were on June 21st and June 28th. So I think people don't know when he's going to be
Right.
used, but he's just been able to keep the runs off the board and occasionally slip in a win. I don't think he has a save yet this year, but he's just a guy that you put him in there and there will be the absence of damage, is what I would say.
I like that. The absence of damage. That is either like the best album cover name or one of those like those Sharknado movie names or something like that. It's either one or the other. That was good. I like that. All right. Well, that's yeah. I mean, Strom's somebody who's always on my watch list, and when it comes to this, especially in those leagues that where he has you have a starting pitcher and a relief pitcher spot,
Oh yeah.
where you can kind of put him in there, in either position, depending on your strategy. But yeah, I same thing. I was looking at his usage, and it was so surprisingly sporadic.
Yes.
Especially since I understand the Philadelphia bullpen is sporadic in general. You never really know exactly who's going to be used when and where because they just feel like everybody's so good. Whether that's true or not, is changes day by day. But yeah, it's been very frustrating. But it's like you can't argue with what he's actually been able to produce when they actually do throw him out there, regardless of who the opponent is, regardless of what he's got going on. Staying in the bullpens, we've got saves to worry about, and we've got a time in the season where you start worrying about the players that you've been holding on to, like the Trevor McGills and like I mean, for me and even Tanner Scotts, who are either waiting for their replacements to get back from injury in the form of McGill, or waiting to be traded to a situation like Scott is in Miami, and wondering if he's going to hold on to that closer role with his new team. We talked about the situation in Toronto earlier. So there's all these situations we have to keep in mind. And then there's always performance. I think I won't give away too much of it, but Ben Rosener over at Pitcherlist had a great article that came out recently of where to find saves at the halfway point of the season. He's got a bunch of great names. I will steal one of the names he threw out there, and that is Fernando Cruz, who's just literally been cruising all season as well. He might just as well fit into the last category. But if Cincinnati needs to make some kind of a move, as in the form of not having Alexis Diaz close anymore, it seems pretty obvious that Fernando Cruz would be the next man up here. 1% rostered in your OCs, and still available in those 15 teamers as well. Type of player that's going to be a positive impact for your team, even whether he's on your bench as a stash or having to be filled in those situations where you can't find a good streamer. So that'll be a name that I steal from Ben there, and throw that out there. Anybody else that I should be watching for, Lucas, in the form of possible saves, whether they're vulture saves, replacement saves, or just a situation that is ever changing, which is always the case.
Yeah. This is a tough team to fish in this pond, but I think as far as the Cubs, I like Porter Hodge. 95-mile-an-hour fastball is decent, but his sweeper's really a solid pitch. And he's really been able to get a lot of strikeouts with it. 34% K rate this year, a little bit high on the walk rate, but I think most fantasy managers can agree that Hector Neris will not keep his job if he continues to do what he's done. There's also Tyson Miller there too, so you'll probably have to say one or the other. I kind of like Hodge more from what I've seen, but you could just kind of pick up Hodge and put him on your team for $1 and give him a test run for a few weeks. In worst case, you could use him during the All-Star break, comeback week, and if you don't have a starter to go in his spot. A lot of people have been saying that the Cubs could buy and get a reliever to replace Neris, and that could happen if they get on a good run. But if they're this far out of the playoffs, I'm not sure if they will, unless it's a cheap thing. But I think if they go internal, you're looking at Hodge or Tyson Miller.
Yeah, I mean, of course, historically, we all know that the Cubs have done that. It's been a minute since they've had to do that. Obviously, trading for Chapman in their World Series run, giving up Gleyber Torres in the return. But so yeah, not to say that they can't do it, but agreed. The NL, as we joked about, the last couple of weeks, it has been a very tight race, but that will not be the case all season long, of course. Um, and Porter Hodge, obviously somebody that we mentioned last week, and our viewer Uncle Ted mentioned him once again. So I'm going to give him an extra shout out as he is been the Porter Hodge fan club 101 in his corner. So shout out there for Porter Hodge once again. It'll be only a matter of time whether we can't talk about him anymore because he won't be available because Uncle Ted will have gotten to everybody. Wild card section. Lucas, you got a couple names on here. I'm just going to leave this one to you because this is the section where I love hearing the names that Kevin comes up with. And the one name you already mentioned early in the show, I totally agree with you. Came out of left field
Yes,
as
he
far
did,
as when
unfortunately.
he can be available once again. So yeah, if you've got a situation where you've got some flexibility on your roster, that you've got some some stashing abilities, or whatever the case may be, who are the names that you're looking at to add to those teams?
Well, I wanted to throw one more quick name out there who's not even on the list, but we had talked about how power's been so tough. I mean, the amount of players that I look at their triple slash and we're not even pushing a 375, 400 slug is crazy.
Hmm.
But Andrew McCutchen for the home runs is a good name, I think. 13% barrel rate. He's got 12 bombs this year, and he leads off basically every day, even though he's going to be 38 shortly. Um, he's a phenomenal pickup for power, I think, in the 15s and usable in the 12s.
Yeah, only 16% rostered, and he's leading off for Pittsburgh too. On top of that, if I'm not mistaken, I don't know the lineup history in front of me, but I was looking at him in my 12 just as recently as last week, and I was so surprised to see, well, not only the production that he was actually putting up, but the fact that, yeah, I mean, we thought that this was a signing at the beginning of the year that was mostly for show because of the
Yes,
history he has with the Pirates, Mr. Pirate type of thing. But no, I mean, he's living up to that MVP name he made for himself last time he was there. At his age and what he's able to bring to the table, he was a more rounded player at one point. But the fact is that you don't expect the speed out of him, but that power has been very nice, even in the at the top of that order. So it's a good call
absolutely.
out there. I like that.
But as far as the kind of bonus, more wild card names, Xander Bogarts is one name that we had mentioned. I had a lot of shares of him in Fab leagues, and unfortunately cut him. And the next thing you know, he's coming back so fast. And the Padres are currently sitting in a wild card position. So if he can add them if he can come back as a reinforcement, if Tatis can come back as a reinforcement, um, they look a lot more interesting. So I like Bogarts. He's already in the AAA rehab, and he's available in loads of leagues out there. 81% owned in the main event, so 19% of the leagues will be adding him this weekend, and he's available in 34% of OCs. I would make him a priority add if you need batting average based on his career historical totals.
Yeah, I mean he's available everywhere because everybody thought he was going to be out until the end of at least the end of July. Never mind the
Yeah.
beginning of July. And
And if they
so
fell out of it, he's got that long contract. I figured, hey, do we even see this guy?
exactly, and the fact that he's back with a a broken shoulder, right, or collarbone? No, it was shoulder. Just diving for a ball. The fact that he's able to come back and swing a bat and play in rehab games this quickly has been, nothing short of a miracle at this point. So
Yes.
yeah, like that. Like I like the call because he's so available in so many places.
And then I got one more guy for wild card, another injury return, but not as available. Lars Nootbaar. Um, a lot of people see him, and they don't think he's much special, and he certainly hasn't had a huge fantasy season, but little bit of home runs, a couple steals here and there, and a decent batting average with a good amount of playing time. He's not as good as Ian Happ, but I think if he lives to his potential, that's kind of the profile he would be, where he's a solid, steady guy across the board, and he doesn't do a whole lot in any given game, but if he compiles, he can provide value. So that's where I'm at with Lars Nootbaar. I think he's a solid little player.
Yeah, just one of those names where, as you mentioned, not readily available, 100% main event, 80% OCs,
Yes,
but you don't realize he's not. You don't realize he's available because you just assume he's not.
true.
And so like you just kind of maybe you scan through the list and you don't notice his name there just because you're like, well, I shouldn't be looking for Norris Newbar. Everybody loves the guy. Um, so there's no real reason there. So it goes to the same advice we give every single week. Just always just check. Just
Yes.
do it. Control F. Just do put the name in the search bar real quick. And of course, as Kevin will always mention, especially on the NFBC, Yahoo does this as well, where you can see the availability of players across all the leagues that you play on the platform. You should use that tool as well to your advantage to finding different players.
Yes, that's such a good piece of advice to throw out there, Adam, because like for James Wood, I pulled him up and found him in one league and then just went to that free agent tab, and I just put little like placeholder bids in all my leagues where I wanted him, which is all the leagues that he's available.
Yeah.
And it was just like, okay, now I don't have to dig him out. If
Yep.
and more so for the non, 80% and up guys. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this kind of leads into where Kevin usually would give any kind of final piece of advice here, but just the fact that you don't have to do Fab only on Sunday afternoons and Sunday evenings. You can do Fab throughout the week. The little things that you can do throughout the week to set yourself up for success on Sundays can go a long way to cutting a 3-hour session of figuring out your Fab down to 1 hour, maybe,
Yes.
depending on how many leagues you have going on. So yeah, just pulling out your phone, adding a guy to either your watch list or just placing like you said, a placeholder bid. You can always make those edits before the deadline on Sunday night. Just makes your life a whole lot easier as things come up.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you nailed it there. Kevin always says a bunch of little things add up to a big thing.
Sure.
And that's so true for a daunting type of fantasy game like fantasy baseball. I mean, even if your team falls out of it, you know, take that challenge of going from 10th place to 5th. See if you can get that 5th to 3rd and get your money back. I mean, there's just so many lessons to be learned, even if you don't think you're going to win the league. I mean, you could just learn the player pool so much better in a place like August and September, where sometimes people are going to give up, and then hey, they're going to figure out that this player had this 2-month run to end the year, and they'll see that tweet in January, and hey, you'll have known that for a long time beforehand. You'll be ahead of the game. So yeah.
That's true. Those are the things you remember. It's like the things that you either didn't pay attention to, and then all of a sudden you're like kicking yourself, or the ones that you made the move and it helped you, make those jumps. Whether it's 10th to 5th or 5th to 3rd, or in the best case scenario, like 4th to 1st.
True.
And most of your leagues, those are still pretty tight races. But Lucas, thank you so much, man, for filling in Kevin's shoes here. I'll give you the straight opportunity to add any other last piece of advice, and or just let everybody know where they can find more of your work or anything else you have working on beyond the article at FTN that we mentioned earlier.
Yeah, what I'll say is like Kevin says, everything adds up to a big thing. It may not culminate in a fantasy championship, but it can help you learn the player pool for next year and just keep working. I was looking through live scoring this week, seeing, okay, in my DC, and I didn't do this for every team, but it was fun to just do it briefly. Like, okay, this guy has IL players in his lineup. This guy has IL players in his lineup. And if he's ahead of you in runs or RBIs, you're more than likely going to catch them as long as you continue to put out a full active lineup. So even sometimes just going through and just seeing which teams you think you can pass up because they are not active, activity is going to create opportunity 100% of the time. So yeah.
I like that line. And you're just full of these activity will create opportunity. Done. I'm put that on my notebook. I like that one a lot. But yeah, anything else? What do you have working on, Lucas, throughout the rest of the season, or that everybody should be keeping an eye out for?
Yeah, so over on FTN, I put out a hitting planner I put it together on Sundays and release it on Mondays. We have tons of good stuff over there, similar to Pitcher List, where these both can kind of be one-stop shops, but more information isn't bad as long as you can synthesize it well. But yeah, we have Vlad Sedler's Faab work. We have a great bullpen report by Rob Orr, and Eric Cross is doing a great pitcher article and has crossed up. We have tons more beyond that, same as Pitcher List, but yeah, I think certainly worth the money at FTN. So feel free to check it out if you haven't already.
Yeah, absolutely. Good call out there. Of course, a lot of near mirroring information, but like you said, great to be able to synthesize different pieces of information, different viewpoints, and kind of put that together to make your own decisions. Because when it really comes down to it, these are your teams. You're
Yes,
making the decisions, and you're just taking whatever advice and information you can, and applying it to what makes sense for you. So great.
absolutely. Don't blame us if it doesn't work either. So
But
because we're,
definitely give
we're,
us the
we're going
credit.
down with those same players if
Yeah,
we're
yeah.
true to our word.
That's
So
that's the key part is that the names at least we throw out here and the names I hear on other podcasts and other articles, I'm trusting the fact that whoever's writing about it or talking about them is also going down with those same players as well. So at least we're in the same boat.
100%.
All right, well, that is going to wrap it up for episode 171 of On the Wire. You can follow myself on the Twitter at 80grade. That's all spelled out. Kevin is still at Hasting Kevin. And of course, follow the pod at On the Wire Pod. Like to get once again, thank our guest Lucas Beery for joining us this week. Follow him at LucasBeery33 on the Twitter. The link to that will be in the show notes of this episode. And after all that, I am Adam Howe on behalf of Kevin Hasting and Lucas Beery. Thanks for listening, and we bid you goodbye.